Welcome to this week's Behind the Poem. I'm going to talk a lot today about sexual assault, both before the piece I share and in the piece I share. So if you need to tap out, I wanted to give that content heads up. And if you need to take breaks, please take care of yourself. I received an email earlier this week through my website. So I'm not sure if it is a stranger, if it's someone I know, if it's an acquaintance somewhere on the spectrum of familiarity. But the email said the person wondered why, given my activism and the way I typically speak out on behalf of women and people who are oppressed, why I had not said anything on social media after the New York Times on December 28th published an extensive article about sexual assault with regards to the Hamas attacks on Israelis on October 7th. And the email also said that if I, Caroline, am a feminist, and in parentheses, also a humanist, that I should be outraged. So the language was, you should be outraged. And I want to talk about my experience receiving that email. My first reaction while reading it was being pretty activated and shaken and triggered. I was ironically in the middle of putting together an agenda for a leadership weekend with Jewish teens in a couple of weeks, where I will be helping young teens figure out, the teens who have already been to Israel before October 7th, how to make space for their authentic story with regards to their experience going to Israel. So that was very ironic timing. And I had taken a break from putting the agenda together to check my email. And so my first initial response was being pretty shaken and activated. I'm a survivor of multiple accounts of sexual assault. I was sexually assaulted for a year and a half in high school by a then friend, peer. I was raped by a stranger my first month of college on my dorm room floor. I've been sexually harassed at a workplace anti-harassment training. I've been verbally assaulted on the street by a stranger who told me I should be raped because I was a woman. I've been physically assaulted by strangers on the street, one who once hit my ass very hard while riding by on a bicycle while I was walking home at night in Brooklyn. I could keep going with the laundry list of ways I've experienced harassment and assault. And so that's the other thing that I experienced upon receiving that email, in a body that carries not only my own stories, but as a person who has been public about my own experiences for 20 plus years, as someone who does consent education as a facilitator and educator and artist, as someone who has been an organizer around sexual assault prevention for half my life, I'm also carrying hundreds of other people's disclosures and stories. And so to have my politics and my experiences weaponized against me, this wasn't the first time. I've had this happen many times before in my life and my career. It's deeply disarming. And I was at a coffee shop. I took myself outside, wept hysterically on the phone to a friend. And over the last many days, as I've continued to process this email, I landed today on the word outrage. And as someone who majored in Latin and classical studies and is a writer, I am quite obsessed with the etymology of words. And something about the word outrage doesn't feel great. It also doesn't feel great to be told what I should feel. That used to be one of my biggest triggers when I had an eating disorder for 10 years. I'm fully recovered now for 19 years, and it doesn't activate me anymore when people tell me how I should feel. But I did notice that. But the word outrage is connected to the notion of extreme shock and anger. I don't know that I'm shocked by what happened on October 7th. I don't know that I'm shocked by what happens every day in this world. I'm not sure that I'm shocked by what's happened since, but I am devastated. Devastation also holds shock. So there's a way that outrage and devastated are interconnected. But what devastation actually holds is grief. I'm devastated by what happened on October 7th. I'm devastated by what's happened since in Palestine, also in Israel. I'm devastated by what happens on Rikers Island. I'm devastated by what happened to me in my bedroom for a year and a half when I was 14 and 15. My dorm room floor at the University of Pennsylvania in 2002. I'm devastated by the way we are treating each other. I'm devastated that we weaponize shame. I'm devastated. Other people are welcome to be outraged, but I'm actually beyond anger. I have no more anger left to give. I have only grief. And that is what I feel. Utter devastation and grief. And I'm going to keep this intro, and I actually don't know what poem I'm going to read, so I'll be back in a moment with whatever it is I decide. Touched on grief. We sit at the cemetery in the middle of the pandemic. We already call it the pandemic, as if there haven't long been other atrocities plaguing the earth. Once, I sat in the alcove of a canyon in Utah and contemplated humanity, how even a world without systemic oppression would still have to grapple with death. But here now, on a Saturday afternoon in May, the rain about to dissipate the sky, I walk back to the car for umbrellas and a palmful of Clorox wipes. I hand 2 umbrellas to my sister and my dad. I stoop down to my brother's grave and wipe the bird shit off his tombstone, a 3rd umbrella clutching at my arm. Like who's to say it's not the umbrella holding me instead of the other way around. It seems consistent to try to sanitize the stone in the wake of all the things we want to clean. But that's this pandemic, the pandemic, the one in which we've catalyzed them all the things we want to wash, all the messy we no longer want to hold. In Chinese medicine, it's the lungs that carry the grief. It's the lungs that carry the stone. It's the lungs that carry the grave. If I could, I would carry that kind of heavy for my brother, even though I carry him with me every day. That's the thing about love. I mean grief. I mean love. To stand there in a rainstorm in a pandemic with a palmful of Clorox wipes. I am trying to love myself harder than I ever have these days. Anything to counter all the loss. May we take care of each other and ourselves.